Tras cualquier colapso importante, ya sea un pulso electromagnético, un fallo de la red eléctrica o un desastre social que convierte las autopistas en aparcamientos de la noche a la mañana, las carreteras se llenan de vehículos abandonados. Miles de ellos, a veces decenas de miles, simplemente allí, con las puertas abiertas y sus dueños desaparecidos hace mucho, caminando hacia algún destino, un destino al que probablemente nunca llegaron. Y cada persona que pasa junto a esos coches comete el mismo error. Buscan un arma en la guantera. Revisan el maletero en busca de comida o agua y luego siguen su camino. Quizás, si son listos, extraen la gasolina que quede en el depósito, pero eso es todo. Tratan un coche abandonado como un callejón sin salida y, al hacerlo, pasan de largo ante una de las colecciones de materiales de supervivencia más valiosas que existen en el mundo moderno. Un coche no es solo un vehículo. Un coche son 2 toneladas de materiales de ingeniería, tejidos de alta resistencia, vidrio templado, metales refinados, sistemas eléctricos, compuestos químicos y componentes de precisión, todo empaquetado en un práctico contenedor al borde de la carretera que nadie está vigilando. Cada coche que pasas es una ferretería, una tienda de telas, un almacén de cables y un laboratorio de química, todo en uno. Y como todos los demás, están obsesionados con lo obvio, como la gasolina o lo que haya en la consola central. El verdadero valor se queda allí oxidándose mientras la gente muere de hambre a unos pocos cientos de metros. Aquí tienes las 7 cosas que se esconden en cada coche abandonado, que podrían mantenerte con vida y porque nadie, excepto tú, pensará en cogerlas. Número 1. Los cinturones de seguridad. Porque nunca encontrarás una cuerda más resistente en ningún otro lugar de un mundo colapsado. Cada coche tiene entre 3 y 5 cinturones de seguridad, y cada uno contiene aproximadamente de 1.8 a 2.4 metros de cincha de poliéster densamente tejida, diseñada específicamente para sujetar un cuerpo humano durante un impacto a 96 kilómetros por hora. Eso significa que el material que tienes en tus manos, al cortar un cinturón de seguridad, puede soportar alrededor de 2.700 kilogramos de fuerza de tracción antes de siquiera pensar en ceder. Para que te hagas una idea, el paracord de grado militar soporta unos 250 kilogramos, lo que significa que una sola correa de cinturón de seguridad es aproximadamente 10 veces más fuerte que la cuerda por la que los supervivencialistas pagan un buen dinero para llevar en sus mochilas de emergencia. Corta el cinturón lo más cerca posible del punto de anclaje para maximizar su longitud y tendrás una correa plana que puede usarse como cuerda de remolque, torniquete, cincha para construir refugios, cabestrillo para transportar equipo o una extremidad herida, un cinturón para sujetar tus pantalones cada vez más holgados a medida que pierdes peso, o un sistema de sujeción para asegurar cargas a tu espalda cuando transportas suministros. Como la cincha es plana en lugar de redonda, distribuye la presión sobre un área más amplia que una cuerda, lo que la hace significativamente más cómoda para cualquier cosa que toque tu cuerpo y mucho menos propensa a cortar lo que sea que esté atada. Puedes sacar 5 cinturones de seguridad de un solo coche en menos de 10 minutos con un cuchillo decente, y eso te da aproximadamente de 9 a 12 metros de la cuerda más fuerte y versátil disponible en cualquier entorno post-colapso. La gente que se peleaba por el paracord en la tienda de camping hace 3 semanas lloraría si supiera lo que hay en cada vehículo. En cada autopista abandonada del país. Número 2. Las barras del reposacabezas. Y estas son tan ignoradas que es casi un crimen. Cada reposacabezas ajustable, en cada coche fabricado en los últimos 40 años, está montado sobre 2 barras de acero cromado que se deslizan en la parte superior del asiento. Tira del reposacabezas hacia arriba. Y encuentra el botón o clip de liberación en el lateral del asiento, presiónalo, y todo el reposacabezas saldrá con 2 varillas de metal macizo unidas, cada una generalmente entre 20 y 30 centímetros de largo. Y con el diámetro de un dedo. Lo que ahora tienes en tus manos son 2 piezas de acero endurecido que son rectas, fuertes. ¿Qué hago más? and already shaped like tools. Sharpen one end on a rock or a piece of concrete, and you've got a punch, an awl, or a crude stabbing implement for self-defense. Bend one into a hook shape, and you've got something that can snag items from hard-to-reach places, pull open stuck doors, or function as a fishing gaff near shallow water. Lash one to a straight branch with your seatbelt webbing, and you've built a spear that can actually penetrate something, unlike the sharpened stick that every survival show pretends as a viable weapon. Use them as tent stakes for securing tarps and shelter materials to the ground in wind. Use them as pins for joining larger pieces of wood together when building structures. The versatility of a simple straight metal rod in a survival situation is almost limitless, and every single car you encounter has at least 4 of them just waiting to be pulled out of the seats. 4 cars gives you a small arsenal of metal tools, and nobody, literally nobody, is competing with you for headrest bars while the world collapses around them. Number 3, the side mirrors. And not just because being able to see behind you is useful, although it absolutely is. A detached side mirror is a refined piece of glass with a reflective coating on the back, and that makes it one of the most multi-purpose tools you can carry in a survival scenario on a clear day. A car mirror angled toward the sun can start a fire by focusing reflected light onto a small pile of tinder. It takes patience and the right angle, but it works reliably, and it doesn't require batteries, matches, lighters, or any consumable resource, just sunlight, which is the one thing that a collapse can't take away from you beyond fire starting. A mirror is a signaling device that can flash reflected sunlight across distances of several miles, making it invaluable if you're trying to attract the attention of rescue aircraft, distant allies, or anyone else you need to communicate with across open terrain. Tilt it back and forth toward the sun, and the flash is visible from enormous distances, even in hazy conditions. But the use that almost nobody considers is tactical observation. A mirror held around a corner or over a ledge lets you see into spaces without exposing your head and body to whatever might be waiting there. Clearing rooms, checking hallways, peeking around building corners, all of these become dramatically safer when you can look without being seen. And a detached car mirror on a stick gives you exactly that capability. Most mirrors can be popped off with a firm pull, or a flat tool wedged behind the housing, and they're small and light enough to slip into a jacket pocket without adding any meaningful weight to your carry. No, 4. The car battery, which is by far the most powerful portable energy source you're going to find anywhere in a collapsed world. And almost everyone ignores them because they're heavy and they don't look like survival gear. A standard 12-volt car battery holds somewhere between 40 and 60 amp hours of stored electrical energy, and even one that's been sitting in an abandoned car for a week or 2 will usually still have enough charge to be extremely useful, especially if the car's electrical systems haven't been draining it. The most immediate survival application is fire. Starting, touch the positive and negative terminals simultaneously with a thin piece of wire, a strip of steel wool, or even a gum wrapper with a foil side. And the short circuit generates enough heat to ignite tinder instantly. This works in rain, in wind, in conditions where matches and lighters are completely useless, and a single battery has enough stored energy to start hundreds of fires before it's fully drained. Beyond fire, a car battery can power LED lights, charge small devices if you have the right adapter, run a small radio for days or weeks of emergency broadcast reception, and even power an improvised electric fence around your camp perimeter using nothing but the battery, some wire, and a basic understanding of how circuits work. Yes, car batteries are heavy, roughly 30 to 40 pounds for a standard lead-acid unit, and that's why most people walk past them. But weight is only a problem if you're moving, and if you've established a fixed shelter location, that battery sitting on your floor is a power plant that gives you capabilities nobody else within a mile radius has. And here's the thing about lead-acid batteries that most people don't know. Even a dead car battery that can't turn an engine over anymore still has enough residual charge to run low-draw devices like LED lights and small radios for a surprisingly long time, because the energy threshold for cranking a starter motor is dramatically higher. then the threshold for powering a flashlight, the battery that's useless for driving, is still incredibly useful for surviving. No. 5. The cabin air filter. And this is the one that genuinely separates people who understand filtration from people who are going to get sick drinking cloudy water and wondering why. Every modern car has a cabin air filter, usually located behind the glove compartment or under the dashboard on the passenger side, and it's designed to remove particulates, pollen, dust, and debris from the air before it enters the vehicle's interior. That layered filtration media, typically a combination of activated carbon and fine mesh fabric, is exactly the kind of material you need for the critical first stage of water purification. Let me be clear about what this does and doesn't do. A cabin air filter will not make water safe to drink on its own. It will not remove bacteria, viruses, or chemical contaminants. You still need to boil or chemically treat any water you plan to put in your body, but what it will do is remove sediment, particulates, and larger organic matter from murky water before you boil it. And that pre-filtration step is enormously important for 2 reasons. First, it makes the boiling process more effective, because pathogens can hide inside clumps of sediment and survive temperatures that would otherwise kill them if the water were clear. Second, it makes the water dramatically more palatable, which matters more than you'd think, because dehydration kills people in collapse scenarios, not just because water is unavailable, but because the available water looks and smells so disgusting that people can't bring themselves to drink enough of it. Pull the filter out, fold it into a funnel shape, or lay it over the mouth of a container and pour your collected water through it before you move on to the boiling stage. The activated carbon layer, if the filter has one, will even reduce some chemical tastes and odors. One filter can process dozens of gallons before it needs to be replaced, and since every car on the road has one replacement, is never more than a short walk to the next abandoned vehicle. Number 6, the wiring harness, which is the circulatory system of the car and contains more usable copper wire than most people would ever guess. A typical vehicle has somewhere between half a mile and a full mile of copper wiring running through it, connecting every sensor, light, motor, and computer module to the battery and to each other. That's hundreds of individual wires in varying gauges, from hair-thin signal wires to thick power cables, all of it insulated in color-coded plastic that protects the copper from corrosion and makes it easy to identify different thicknesses for different purposes in a survival context. Copper wire is one of those materials that solves problems. Across almost every category of need, thin-gauge wire can be formed into snares and traps for catching small animals like rabbits, squirrels, and birds, providing an ongoing food source that doesn't require you to be present when the catch happens. Medium-gauge wire can be wound into coils to build a basic antenna for improving radio reception, or wrapped around a nail and connected to a battery to create a simple electromagnet for picking up small metal objects. Heavy-gauge wire serves as structural binding for shelter construction, functioning essentially as reusable metal rope that doesn't rot, stretch, or weaken in wet conditions the way organic cordage does. And any gauge of copper wire can be used to build tripwire alarm systems. Herramientas es salida, around your sleeping position, strung tight between anchor points at ankle height, where it's nearly invisible in low light. The easiest way to access the wiring harness is through the engine compartment and under the dashboard, where the largest bundles of wire are routed and most accessible. You don't need to pull every wire from the entire car. That would take hours and isn't worth the effort. Just grab the thickest accessible bundles, cut them free with a knife or a sharp piece of metal, and coil them up. 20 minutes of work gives you more wire than you'll use in a month, and it weighs almost nothing relative to its utility. 0.7. The floor mats, the trunk liner, and every piece of interior fabric you can rip out, because in a survival situation, insulation and ground cover are worth more than almost anything else you're carrying. And cars are upholstered coffins stuffed with exactly the materials you need. The rubber floor mats that every driver steps on without thinking are waterproof, durable, flexible, and large enough to serve as ground sheets that block the moisture and cold of bare earth from seeping into your body while you sleep. Lay 2 of them under your sleeping position, and you've just eliminated conductive heat loss through the ground, which is the single biggest cause of nighttime temperature drop for people sleeping rough in cold conditions. But the real treasure is the carpet and fabric lining that covers the trunk, the doors, the pillars, and the ceiling of the car's interior. This material is typically a dense, layered composite of synthetic fibers, backed with foam or felt padding, and it was engineered to insulate the cabin from outside noise and temperature, which is exactly what you needed to do. For your body and your shelter, peel the ceiling headliner down, and you've got a large sheet of insulating fabric that can be wrapped around your torso. Draped over a shelter frame as an extra thermal layer, or hung over windows and doorways in your camp to block drafts and retain heat, the trunk liner is usually even thicker and can be cut into sections for targeted insulation, wrapping around your feet at night, lining the inside of a sleeping bag or blanket cocoon, or padding the floor. Of whatever structure you're sheltering in a single car, yields enough fabric and padding material to meaningfully insulate one person's sleeping area, and since you're surrounded by hundreds of abandoned vehicles, scaling this up to insulate an entire room is just a matter of time and willingness to rip interiors apart. While everyone else is burning furniture for warmth and advertising their position with smoke and firelight, you're wrapped in 3 layers of automotive insulation, sleeping comfortably in the dark without producing a single visible or olfactory signal. That's not just comfort, that's invisible survival, which is the only kind that lasts. So let's put this together and look at what a single dead car actually gives you. When you stop seeing it as a broken machine and start seeing it as a survival supply cache that someone conveniently parked within walking distance of wherever you happen to be, from one vehicle you walk away with 30 feet of military-grade cordage from the seatbelts, 4 hardened steel tool blanks from the headrests, a signal mirror and tactical observation device from the side mirrors, a portable power plant from the battery, a water pre-filtration system from the cabin air filter, enough copper wire to build traps and alarms and antennas for a month, and enough insulation material to keep you warm through the coldest night without ever lighting a fire. That's from one car. And there are millions of them sitting empty on every road, highway parking lot, and driveway in the country. The people who survive a long-term collapse aren't going to be the ones who fought hardest over the last case of bottled water at the supermarket. They're going to be the ones who looked at the world differently, who saw resources where everyone else saw wreckage, who understood that survival isn't about finding the things you need, it's about recognizing that those things have been sitting around you your entire life, disguised as everyday objects. You never thought twice about every dead car is a gift that its owner doesn't need anymore, and that no one else is smart enough to unwrap. So the next time you walk past an abandoned vehicle on a silent highway, don't keep walking. Open the door, pull the headrest, cut the seat belts, pop the mirror, check the filter, follow the wires, and strip the interior down to the frame by the time you're done. You'll be carrying more survival utility than most people's entire bug-out bag, and you got all of it from something the rest of the world left behind. Because they didn't know what they were looking at, you do now.